Look, Jackie, Mrs. Parks and myself are just good friends, all right?
Welcome to week 41 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 198, originally aired Monday, May 6th, 1985. Warren asks Maggie on a date, and she says she doesn't date because she's married.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much the whole thing for them today.
That was that dialogue.
Cruz and Eden have barricaded themselves on the houseboat to celebrate. Maggie and Warren arrive to find a note pinned on the door, telling people to bug off.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia and Carmen arrive too, having never met before. They end up introducing themselves to each other. And another note gets slipped under the door when Carmen continues to bang on it. And it says, "We're engaged." This makes Sophia very happy, and Carmen even more miserable than she was when she got there. She says, "Cece and I had worked this out. Why are they still together?"
And I think this could signal a little bit of a realignment, potentially, with Sophia being so supportive. I think this could bring her and Eden a little closer together, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe Cruz's mom and Cece could get together once everything collapses with Gina.
Mm-hmm.
So Sophia defends Cruz and Eden's marriage. She says she thinks it's great.
Yeah, why not?
Carmen and Cece thought it was a mistake, and she has no trouble telling Sophia that.
Yeah.
Mason comes home in the morning to find Jackie and Ted asleep on the couch.
Not a good look.
Nope. Jackie wakes up screaming from a nightmare. Says, "Oh yeah, I just had a nightmare. I was told that Larry's dead." Mason tells Ted he's too trusting. And also, he wants to know what he was doing in the tunnels with Gina and Hank.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, instead, wants to spend the time looking for the tape. He searches the apartment and finds it in a dresser.
Mm-hmm.
And Mason grabs it from him, and Ted swings at him, and then Mason ends up punching Ted, which he immediately apologizes for. He does get to keep the tape, though.
And I actually think Mason was right in this exchange. Not only, he says when he comes in and sees Jackie there, he says, "Oh, she should know better," which is kind of what we've been saying all along. But also, I think he's a little bit right about Ted being gullible, and I think he's right to be concerned about how Ted got mixed up with Gina and Hank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When Jackie and Ted arrive at the Perkins house, they run into Jade, who's cautiously nosy. She doesn't really let on that she thinks something untoward happened, but we find out later she really kind of does.
Yeah.
And Jackie says, "And don't get any funny ideas about Ted and me. We're just friends."
Yeah, no teacher should ever have to say that.
Jackie says
bad
she's
sign.
going to call in sick because she's expecting a visitor. And as Jade leaves for school, a Navy chaplain arrives and tells her that Larry is dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time. Dying, but
Been
finally he's
expecting
really
it for
dead.
quite a while, yeah. And I have to say, although I'm certainly not a fan of Jackie and I'm not really loving the storyline she's in right now, I did think the actress who played her actually did a really nice job in this scene, especially in reacting to the officer's news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lakin brings flowers for Augusta, and Lionel sneaks in, as he usually does, when another family member or doctor visits. Augusta says to Lakin that Lionel's probably seeing Sophia now that she's forgiven him.
Mm-hmm.
To which Lionel shouts, "Horse feathers!" So now Augusta realizes Lionel's been sneaking in, and she's very upset by that, kicks him out, and decides she's just going to leave. So she takes off her bandages and realizes that she's blind. Did you see that coming?
I remember it briefly being mentioned on the cruise.
Oh.
Yeah, I did actually expect that. So I thought that those bandages, were, and I didn't think they could necessarily pass up the opportunity to make her blind once she had those bandages on her on her
It's a
face.
standard soap opera trope, so give her something to do for a while she's fending off Lionel's advances.
Now, I'm not blind myself, but I wouldn't actually think if you were blind you would think you were in the dark necessarily, because you couldn't see darkness, could you? You just wouldn't be able to see.
I don't know, because she was convinced that the lights had just been turned off, and then when she turns them on, she is convinced the bulb is burned out, but of course she immediately burns herself on it. Then she realizes it. And then she remembers that in the movies, blind people have to feel around to learn their surroundings. And so she does that. And, finds the TV near the door, and on top is the flowers that Lakin had brought her. And when the doctor comes in, she tries to bluff him. She still wants to be released. So she tells him, wow, this is great. The room's exactly like I pictured it from when I couldn't see. TV's there and the beautiful flowers on the TV. But what she doesn't realize is that when the doctor came in, the nurse popped in for a second and grabbed the flowers and took them out.
Mm-hmm.
So the
jig was up.
Realizes that Augusta's lying. It's not the same doctor from before, the one who told Lionel that, I'll just tell you everything.
Yeah.
So the doctor has to watch Augusta make her way back to the bed. He says, I can help you. And she goes, no, I can do it. So she's kind of turned into a stock character who's gone blind and has to insist to the world that they can do everything when they've only just spent 3 seconds walking to a bouquet of flowers that doesn't exist. So I thought that was a bit over the top, having her say I can do it, and then counting her paces back to the bed that she memorized earlier. But I don't know. We'll see how lame this is. But then the important thing is that, knowing that Lionel can't help her, she makes a phone call, and we get to meet Julia Wainwright, Augusta's sister, who almost hangs up on Augusta, because from the dialogue it sounds like Augusta hasn't talked to her in 10 years. Julia's lifting barbells when we first see her.
Yeah, so this probably would have been around the era of, Olivia Newton-John doing physical, perhaps.
Maybe Jane Fonda.
Yeah, Jane Fonda. And we see Julia in very similar kind of jumpsuit to the one people were wearing back then for aerobics, and looking very fit and lifting very large weights. And the actress they cast to play Augusta's sister, I thought was very well cast, because she actually does look a little bit to me like an Amazon version of Augusta. They have sort of a similar shape of face and that. So you could believe they were sisters.
And you were probably wondering, when's this Nancy Graham going to show up that I've seen as the third longest running character on Santa Barbara every time I look at IMDb, but I have no idea who it is.
Well, of course, I'm not allowed to look at IMDb, but
I think you knew that she was a long-running character, because I think you'd seen her in a lot of cast photos. And I don't know if it's Gran or Gran.
I don't know.
So Augusta says, I need to see you. And she goes, maybe next year. I really need to see you. Well, there's a legal conference in June. So she's a lawyer. We need more lawyers. She could now interact with Lindsay, Mason, Jack.
I thought this actually opened up a lot of possibilities for the plotting going forward. Whether it does or not, we'll see. But it means, for one thing, that when Warren and Maggie finally get fed up with Mason, they've actually got somewhere to go with their case. It also, to me, and this is purely speculation of one direction things could go in, we've been anticipating that maybe this case with Maggie Gillis could set up some sort of an epic court battle between Mason and CC. But if you think of all the shenanigans that Gina's going through and the various realignments that are happening with the various Capwell kids and that, it could end up at some point that Mason and CC end up being aligned again, and maybe the epic courtroom battle could end up being between Mason and Julia. Mason defending CC.
I have no memory of how this plays out, so that's quite possible.
But that was just another possibility that entered my mind, knowing that this character is going to be on the show for the duration, so I'm sure there's going to be lots for her to do.
I wonder if Augusta's blindness is solely a plot device to get Julia on the scene, or if they'll actually, make some use of it as well for Augusta. Yeah, we talked before about how a lawyer can't just move to another state. Julia's coming from Phoenix, but possibly she already was a lawyer in California before moving to Arizona, and actually can practice in both places. So we'll see if they mention that she has to pass the bar or anything in California, but we'll let it pass because I assume the Wainwrights are originally from California.
I don't know.
We may find out.
We'll find out a little bit more about them.
So Julia arrives from Phoenix and runs into Lionel, who does not recognize her. And she says, "Oh, last time I saw you, you promised me a ruby." He still is drawing a blank, so that's interesting.
Apparently he offers a lot of women rubies.
She says, "Well, I was quite overweight and I had an overbite, but I've had 5 years of braces." I think Lionel mentioned she had the overbite, so... she doesn't let Lionel into the room. Goes to say hi to Julia.
To Augusta.
Sorry, to Augusta, and Augusta immediately reveals that she's blind. And Lionel sneaks into the room again, and Julia quickly covers by saying, "Hey, Lionel, are you supposed to be in here?" And Augusta says no, and quickly puts her glasses back on. So Julia, got the hint very early on that she doesn't want anyone to know that she's blind, so that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And Julia remembers as a kid carrying Augusta's train at the wedding to Augusta and Lionel, and causing Augusta to trip. So Nancy Grahn is 29 according to IMDb at this time, and Louise Sorel is 45. So it's, quite an age difference between sisters. Nancy Grahn pretty much looks older than 29 to me. I always thought she was older. But now she looks the same age still. So that's very weird.
Well, this was a point in the 80s when women were wearing a lot of dark makeup, too. So I think that probably ages a person when you've got mascara all around your eyes and everything.
Especially a soap opera
makeup
job.
Well, we've noticed even just over the course of the last year that, Jade's makeup is getting heavier and her hair is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So
Nancy
it's part
Grahn
of the look.
has just started up a podcast recently where I believe she's interviewing soap people. I just saw the one where she interviewed Luke of Luke and Laura fame, Tony Geary. That was a good interview. And Louise Sorel showed up today in the summer preview for Days of Our Lives. So it looks like Vivian Alamain will be back at some point, which we already knew because, having been on the Santa Barbara cruise that Louise Sorel was supposed to attend, we found out that the reason she missed the cruise was because she had to take a job.
It's a pretty nice reason.
So hopefully she'll be on for a while and wreak some havoc. The doctor, this new doctor, refuses to give Lionel any information. Jade and Lakin are hanging out there in the waiting area. And Jade mentions somewhat slyly to Lakin that Jackie spent the night at Ted's apartment. She first goes, I gotta go take care of Jackie. It's my turn, because Ted had the late shift. And then Lincoln's like, what do you mean? They were together all night. Lincoln's like, what were they doing, driving around? Said, no, they went to Ted's apartment. So Lincoln's annoyed, and when Ted arrives, she won't make eye contact with him.
Yeah.
Jade tells Ted a Navy officer arrived just as she was leaving home. This is their lunch break, which they claim is quite short, but they seem to manage to do a lot in it.
Yeah.
Ted immediately races off and shouts back, "We're just good friends, okay?" Jackie, meanwhile, has packed a bag and left a note for the Perkinses that she's driving up to Monterey. And she's got a lot of voiceover flashbacks of her and Larry planning to do a second honeymoon in Monterey. So she's going to do that on her own.
Now, I'm willing to bet that Ted will intercept her before she leaves, and they will both end up going to Monterey together.
I feel like this is a likelihood.
And, whatever transpires, we'll probably not see Jackie in any better stead with her job at Lyman.
No.
And I don't think it's going to help Ted's relationship with Lakin very much either.
No. The next time we see Mrs. Lambie, she may well be firing Jackie. And expelling Ted, maybe.
Yeah.
Gina puts her pregnancy test into Mason's medicine cabinet and prepares to wait the 4 hours for the results.
Now, I guess this is probably a norm for pregnancy tests in the 80s.
I think so. There's a whole chemistry set involved, and she had to mix things together.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've evolved in 35 years.
Yeah.
Mason arrives, walks in, and Gina says, "Mason, have you still got your keys?" He says, "Oh yeah, Dad forgot to take them when he stripped me of my epaulets." So Gina's kind of anxious when he makes to go upstairs. He goes, "I'm just getting something. I'll be back in 2 minutes." So he ends up walking right into his bathroom because, as you remember, Mason's razor broke.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "I wonder if my old razor is still in here." So it's a very logical reason for him to be in the bathroom, open up his medicine cabinet, and find a pregnancy test with instructions on the box. So he reads it, says, "Wait 4 hours." He looks at the test, goes, "I can wait 4 hours. Let's see what's up here." He hides in the bathtub. I don't know if Gina realizes that he never left the house after his 2 minutes were up. But he spends the day in the bathtub drinking wine and making phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up calling to make arrangements to meet the Capwell attorney, and he says this is on the down low. I don't want Warren or Maggie to find out.
Now, I think, although he obviously has uncovered some really good stuff for the court case,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this on the down low is going to really endear him to Warren and Maggie very much. I don't think that's really normally how you should approach your client relationships. So I think that might be one thing that maybe moves them more towards Julia if they do decide they need another lawyer.
But I mean, from Mason's standpoint, the last time they had a meeting, Cece kicked Warren out and threatened Maggie, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I think this way, if it's just him and the Capwell attorney, and he says, "Hey, look, I found evidence that safety valve probably wasn't even installed at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 5 engineers who will testify that even if it wasn't done properly." Maybe he can get the lawyer to, convince CC to pony up quite a lot more money.
Yeah, that's a good point,
and then he can present that a bigger offer to Maggie and Warren, I think without a lot of interference.
Yeah, I think with this whole lawsuit storyline, a lot of it's going to hinge as much as anything, because we've already talked about various ways it could go. Really hinges on what the writers want to do with it, and if they get tired of the Maggie character, do they just want to, settle it and move on like they did with the Amanda Lockridge? So we'll just have to. And there is the opportunity for that as well, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Eventually, Mason checks the tests and finds out its result.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, "Now I wonder who it is. Kelly? No. Eden? Maybe we've got a little Castillo running around soon." So anyway, he waits and he sees. He didn't think it would be Gina because Gina's already pregnant, but he sees Gina come in, and she takes one look at the test and says, "Damn." So now Mason knows she's not pregnant and that she's hiding it from Cece, and he's got a whole lot of ammunition just from being patient for 4 hours.
Yeah, I loved how he just sort of settled in for the day with his legal documents. He's got his bottle of wine. He's just made himself really comfortable in the bathtub.
I mean, again and again, we see how Mason keeps his eye out for potentially embarrassing information that he can then use against someone. Really, a lot like Channing, if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know if he makes a noise or rough rustles the curtain, but Gina senses something and whirls around but doesn't see anything. But Mason sort of sinks down into the tub, which you'd think would make more noise. But so we don't know if Gina will discover Mason there, or he'll say, well, Gina, turns out you're not really pregnant, and here's all the things I want you to do for me now to help me out with Dad.
Yeah, it'll be interesting either way if this creates a situation where Mason has Gina in more of a vice, and that's always entertaining because Gina is so resourceful. It's always kind of neat to see how she twists around and who she throws under the bus and how she tries to get out of it.
I think they are worthy opponents for each other.
They are.
He's very wily, and she manages to wriggle out from under things.
And, or if she doesn't detect him, that's another little piece of information he's got in his collection. So it's like he's getting this whole collection of ammunition to lob at CC at various times of his choosing.
Well, let me just say, I remember where this is going. It's one of the classic scenes of all time on Santa Barbara, and it's going to be really enjoyable.
Oh, boy.
Assuming you enjoy that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. Now, is that in the next episode or leading up to something?
I think it's got to be pretty soon. So, it might happen in 199, might happen in the next week or two.
And we know that May 20th is going to be a really fun episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great May.
Yeah.
We haven't watched any of the promos for a few weeks.
No.
Or a couple of weeks.
Are there any? Do you have
I
some?
don't know. I'll check if I can find some on YouTube. I'll pre-watch them to make sure they're not too spoilery and bring you up to speed on up until last week anyway. So Larry is dead.
Rest in peace.
Now, the last time we talked about who do you think will be leaving the show next? Do you remember that? It was a long time ago. Joe had died, I believe, because that was the last one. And you said, well, maybe you had 4 guesses. You were trying to hedge your bets on your $5 prize. You said maybe Marissa or Jade or Larry or Jackie. So you earned $1.25.
Okay.
But your bet is now canceled because someone else has left the show.
Oh, that we don't know.
Well, we do know. They've been gone since the day Joe died, and you haven't mentioned them.
Oh.
Do you know who left the show?
Oh, my goodness. There was that weird detective.
Yeah, he's gone too. I wasn't counting him as a main character, but probably we should have counted him. I think he was in the regular credits.
So I do remember him.
There was a person that was regularly in the credits and involved in a story that just vanished.
And they couldn't have been that memorable because I've already forgotten them.
Should I tell you?
Yeah.
Elizabeth Peel.
Oh, right.
Her last scene was with Amy, when she told Amy that Brick and her weren't having a thing, and that was her last scene, and she was never mentioned again.
So she could still be painting in Warren's barn, or she may have finally moved on.
Well, definitely her IMDb credit is from that episode, her final day.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't even mentioned her. Warren didn't even say, oh, Elizabeth did go back to England, or, oh, Elizabeth finished painting my barn. I forgot to tell her I didn't want to move in with her.
Well, I'm not surprised, because her storyline really, I think, kind of dribbled out after the Amanda Lockridge was revealed, and we had the whole thing with Lionel thrown in jail, and then her last big act was kind of rescuing Warren when Mason was pursuing him. But I have to say, I'm not sure where the character would have gone from from there anyway.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that, now looking back on it, that they seem to be, replacing one actor with another very quickly. I mean, Peter basically died the day Marcello walked into the show, and Elizabeth left the day Maggie joined the show.
Mm.
And from an HR standpoint, I guess that makes sense, because you only got a finite budget for payroll. So it makes sense that you would have a certain number of major characters on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a plotting standpoint, too, it makes sense. If you wrap up one storyline, next day you can't just let everyone just watch TV. There's got to be a new person to walk in to stir up trouble. But in our case, we didn't realize that Elizabeth had her final scene, unlike with Peter.
Well, I think there was a bit more overlap between Peter and Marcello.
It was pretty close, though.
Because Marcello was there helping to negotiate
Mm.
with Peter. And let's see, we first saw Marcello on the train when Lionel was out on bail, I guess.
I think it was the first week in January we saw Marcello. And now this week we've had both Larry and Frank die. No, not Frank. What's the guy's name? Jeff Barber. I mean, Jeff's quite a minor character. But we've also had Julia and Nick as new characters. So
yes,
maybe
that's right.
Nick's, the Jeff Barber, level of payroll person, and maybe someone else will leave to make up for the Julia payroll.
Will it be Jackie or Amy?
I guess that's the question. If you want to win another $5, who will be the next person to leave?
Well, I mean, Amy's got to be on long enough to have the baby and get involved in this, baby swap or whatever is going on. So I don't see Amy leaving right away. I would see her hanging in for a while. The Jackie storyline, I think, has to go on long enough for Ted to be fully disgraced, basically, and to torpedo his chances with Lakin, and to then sort of stop the clock and start that over again. I imagine there'll be a lot of time spent on him trying to win back Lakin after.
It makes me wonder how long they could string it out, because the show's been on 8 months now, 9 months, and they still haven't slept together. They've come close a few times. So this could be the writers just having a huge laugh going, let's see what else we can do.
Well, Lakin could get another boyfriend, too,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could go through various partners of various types for quite a while before they reconnect with each other. So anyway, for me, I don't really see the Jackie character as being one for the ages, because I think at this point she's basically there to be a major impediment between Ted and Lakin.
Thinking she's likely the next person to go.
I don't
of
know.
The major ones.
I mean, that one.
It's hard to tell of the Jack Stanfield Lee group who's meant to be a longer lasting one.
Yeah, that's right too.
Parker Simonson and Blonde Lady and Jack.
Yeah, I mean that whole
Mr. Friendly.
storyline will need to play out, and
yeah, definitely. Even if it's a short-term storyline, it's still ramping up. So
yeah, exactly. And also, I mean the May 20th thing, whatever Marcello has cooked up, if that comes and goes and his plans are thwarted or he's killed in the process or whatever, then that's him gone probably after May 20th.
Or if he blows up the whole Capwell family on May 20th.
Then we'll know, that contracts were being renegotiated or something?
So you're thinking 50-50 Marcello and Jackie, or more Jackie?
I think
Jackie will be gone before May 20th? What's today? Today's May. This was May 6th. So it's 14 days. So it's like
it depends how long that plays out. the trip to
Monterey.
Monterey, and them somehow being discovered, and what kind of repercussions there are with that. But I just feel like with so many other storylines going around, like with the Cruz and Eden wedding, the Channing murder, whatever Marcello has cooked up, I just don't know how long that one's going to last. So I would say that one I feel has a shorter life than May 20th.
So Jackie first, then Marcello, or the whole Capo family. All right, I'll make note of that. Jackie, then Marcello. Let's see how that goes. Let's see which of the newbies that we met this week are long-lasting and mature.
Yeah, because the photographer could be a very short-term character. Or, if he rescues Kelly or they end up in prison together for a while or something, that could actually be a longer-term character if he became some sort of a potential love object for Kelly or something.
Mm-hmm. Seems to have a nice demeanor.
Yeah, well, I thought they actually had pretty good chemistry when they first met, which was why I was surprised when she was, slamming the door in his face and latching it. Mm-hmm. So, I guess we'll just have to see how their storyline plays out. I think it could go either way with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. We had a whole day without... Well, Kelly wasn't in the episode, but you kind of wondered, did Nick just abandon her after that scene and let a whole day pass? Or has he actually been working towards making sure she's safe?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we will find out which of these people will stay longer and which of these people are doomed when we watch episode 199 of Santa Barbara. See you.
Bye-bye.
School teacher Jackie Parks came to Santa Barbara to spend a few days with her friend Amy Perkins and ended up getting a job at Lyman Prep while she waited for her husband Larry to quit the Navy. Receiving a letter, she feared the worst, only to find that Larry had once again canceled his leave so that he could fly another mission. When Larry finally arrived in Santa Barbara, he was shot seconds later by the Carnation Killer. Shaking off the bullet, Larry and his wife came up with a brilliant plan to save the day by having him run across the room and get knocked out by Peter Flint. Later, in the hospital, Larry met Ted Capwell, and Jackie asked Larry to quit the Navy. After his leave was unexpectedly cut short, he promised her that he would quit. The next time a letter arrived from Larry, he wrote a lot about missions, but very little about quitting the Navy. When another messenger showed up at the door, this time it was for real. Larry's plane had been shot down, and he was missing. Shortly after, it was confirmed that he was dead. Although Larry Parks was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery, his headstone takes its place in our Santa Barbara Cemetery.
Look, and also, don't get any funny ideas about Ted and me. We're just friends.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 199 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Tuesday, May 7th, 1985. Mason discovers that Gina is pregnant, but he borrows a chemistry set from Brandon and goes about changing the color of the liquid so that when Gina sees it, she'll think she's not pregnant.
If I were Mason or Gina, I would have worn gloves or something to handle that little container, because, that is urine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
It almost seemed like it was clear by the end, which is odd, because you'd think you could just put water in that case.
Yeah,
But I think it was red when it was affirmative, so maybe Mason was trying to turn it blue.
Yeah, I don't know, but it did seem to me that whatever he has in mind, he'll have to do it fairly quickly, because if Gina is pregnant and, we know her window is very tight. Cece already thinks she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever Mason's planning to do, he'll have to act very quickly. Not only because of the timeline of the pregnancy, but of course because if she keeps popping pills and guzzling alcohol, she may actually not be pregnant again for that much longer.
Mm-hmm. So Gina comes in and looks at it and says, Cece just can't get me pregnant. What am I going to do? Then when Gina leaves, Mason says, you need a knight in shining armor. Sir Mason, it's time for you to save the day. For a price, of course.
I just love Mason's little soliloquies. We've seen him do that a lot, and it's almost very Shakespearean, the way he does these little asides to himself.
They're always very entertaining.
Yeah.
Downstairs, Gina is surprised that Mason is still there. He says he was using Dad's books for reference, and Gina says that's inappropriate. So she has taken over the house and is now an arbiter of appropriateness, and Mason says, you have a keen sense of propriety. Then he says he wants to talk to her after his meeting with Cece. She doesn't want to, but he says, oh, it's about your marriage. Hello, Uncle Ross, says Mason, as another attorney arrives. This guy's an even bigger wig in the firm, and clearly a longtime family friend. So Mason meets with Cece and Ross, and Mason tells them that Maggie had to work and that she's authorized him to take the meeting alone, which is not true.
No.
Unless he secretly included that in their contract, that he could take meetings without her. That's the authorization he's referring to.
It's possible, and it's possible that if they do call him on it when they find out, that he might point to some fine print or say, oh, well, that's standard practice or something like that.
So Mason informs them all that he's subpoenaed all the Campwell files and he's sent out depositions for all the employees, one of whom was suspiciously dismissed immediately after the explosion. And that he's got all sorts of expert reports about these installation of these valves.
Yeah.
And then Mason tries to show Cece before and after photos of Ben, and Cece says he doesn't want to see them, and Ross says this is just inflammatory. And Mason says, I intend to inflame the jury.
Yeah.
We'll start with $2 million minimum.
Yeah, I thought the comment, this is inflammatory, was probably not going to put Mason off at all. That's the whole point.
So, I don't know if $2 million is enough when he had started with 20 last time. So I really don't know. I mean, that's a lot less nowadays than it was 35 years ago. But, I mean, Ben's care is probably not covered by any insurance or anything, so $2 million might actually not be very much when you're talking about taking care of someone for 50, 60, 70 years. Well,
I was thinking when we saw this scene, because that sort of was where the scene ended, that this was going to be the start of an itemized list. So we'll start at $2 million for primary care.
I see.
That was one thought I
had. Because the will start must refer to something.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if it doesn't go to court, if it's just settled. I wonder how much Maggie will get.
Yeah, to see.
Assuming Mason wins, I mean, it seems to be going well for him.
So far.
Ted gets into Jackie's car before she can drive away, as we had predicted.
Yeah, this was all very predictable. And I think that the negative fallout is somewhat predictable as well.
She tells him that she's going to Carmel and Monterey, like she had planned to with Larry.
Yeah.
And then Ted says, oh, great, we can swing by Stamford. And I'll drive. So she shoves over and they start driving. Now, I have to admit that I had never knew that Stamford was in California.
Yeah.
I thought it was back east.
San Francisco.
I didn't really realize it was near there. So it's somewhere between Monterey and Carmel, it seems. So then we see them later on, after they've checked into their rooms in, I think, Monterey.
Yeah.
And they're adjoining rooms, so we'll see what happens tonight.
I'm sure something will happen before they make their way back.
Well, Jackie says she wants to go for a 17-mile drive before dark. So if they start in Monterey and drive to Carmel, that's the start of the 17-mile drive. That goes through Pebble Beach and ends at Lovers Point Park. And that's a loop, so they'll be back above Monterey and can go home from there. So they're doing a loop Monterey, Pebble Beach. I'm doing this. This is the West Coast. So we'll see if they end up at Lovers Point Park in an hour or so.
Now, I guess part of the premise of this is that Jackie is overcome with grief, so she's not really thinking clearly, and Ted is young and gullible, as Mason's already told him. But you do have to wonder what the end game is in this for them. I mean, they go back to Santa Barbara, after a week or after a few days? Everyone knows they've been gone on this road trip together. What does Jackie think is going to happen to her job? And what is Ted thinking, Jackie could be ruined after this. She's already lost her husband. It's not just a matter of her not necessarily being able to keep her job. I mean, CC could destroy her, as we've seen him do with
And
Mason.
if she just decided, I'm going to just go back to San Diego, I mean, she's going to try and get a teaching job there, and they're going to want to talk to Lyman about it, about her last posting.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know what Ted thinks this is. I mean, that's the idea, though. He's young and impetuous, but, it's pretty much going to blow up his chances of getting back together with Lakin anytime soon.
And at one point during their stop, maybe when they stopped at Stanford, Jackie got really quite angry with Larry for not quitting the Navy earlier. Gina tells Cece that it bothers her that so many people know about Brandon. And she tries to get Cece to fire Rosa and Ruben. He says they've been working with us for years. He's kind of laid back about it. He's not really angry with her for that. Which is interesting, considering how much like family they are.
Well, you can see that she's pushed the boundaries a lot. She's pushed them, in terms of CC, she's pushed them with Mason, and that kind of worked because CC's been mad at Mason for a while. She tried pushing them with Eden. That didn't work as well. I don't know if she's quite aware of how much that didn't work yet. It's not working with Rosa and Ruben. It's not going to work with most of the other people, I think, who have been in CC's life for a long time. And eventually, I think that's going to ricochet back on her. And I'm not sure she's quite grasped that yet.
Then she says, well, Santana doesn't work here. And she, I guess, doesn't want Santana ever to come around the mansion again. But Cece says, she gives me no cause for alarm.
I think, ironically, by being away, completely away for that length of time, she's actually gained Cece's trust a little bit.
He says, Gina, you let too many things alarm you. Which is funny, because she often has a generally alarmed look about her.
She does. And of course, she's got this pill habit, so she's probably a little bit paranoid or whatever from that, too.
So then Santana arrives and goes into the study with Cece.
Great timing.
And he says that she's more beautiful than ever. So it's a good thing Gina doesn't overhear that after this conversation.
That wouldn't go over very well.
She ends up looking at the spot where Channing was killed and tells him that Channing's killer must be caught. I remember one of Mason's lines from an upcoming episode. The blood that spilled that day, you can still see the ghost of it on the carpet there, Dad. So that's, that carpet, I guess, probably should have been changed out.
I think so, at the very least. Yeah. And it'll be really interesting to see, she's back in her kind of crusading mode, how that will weather after she learns about Channing Jr. and Lindsay. And whatever other possible secrets might come out, I guess.
Yeah. Marcello constructs a bomb. He had some dynamite there.
Yeah.
It looked very bright red. Maybe it's special dynamite. So, my theory that that's going to go under one of those benches in the yacht.
That's what I think.
Could be accurate. Lionel tells his boss, Mr. Zimmerman, that he won't be in until he knows Augusta's all right. Now, he hasn't actually worked today yet. Zimmerman says these mattresses aren't going to sell themselves. But he does seem a little bit okay with Lionel taking a few more days off.
Yeah, I think Lionel needs to be careful, though. You know, he's kind of pushing it a little bit, and that control of the Lockridge portfolio is not just going to happen by itself.
No, I mean, if he has to get another job, it's going to be back to square one.
Yeah.
It'll take a long time to get his 2 months before his probation's over. Julia tells him that she'll be the one taking Augusta home, which Lionel finds surprising since they haven't spoken in 10 years. But Julia covers about, how bad off Augusta is. And Lionel kind of overplays how big his new career is without actually saying what it is that he's doing. So Julia takes Augusta home, and Lionel sneaks into Augusta's bedroom with a giant teddy bear while Augusta's taking a shower, I guess. And Lionel gets on the bed and holds up the bear so that it's the first thing Augusta will see. And he's shocked to find when Augusta comes into the room that she's obviously blind.
Yeah.
So then he's kind of trapped because he's sitting on the bed and Augusta plunks herself down. Luckily she's still on her side and isn't hugging the whole thing. So then he's kind of trapped there. Luckily Julia comes back with lunch and spots Lionel, and Lionel goes, shh. And so Julia moves around to the left side of the bed and sits down on it just as Lionel gets up, so that Augusta will think, won't feel the extra motion. And then she hands Augusta the bear and says, "Oh, it's from Lionel." So at first she doesn't want it, but then Julia talks her into it. Oh, it's very expensive and it's very cute, so she decides to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Lionel sneaks out.
Yeah.
So this is probably not going to be Lionel's last secret visit to Augusta's room once she's born.
No, but it was kind of nice to see he and Julia forming a little bit of an understanding, or a little bit of an alliance.
Yeah, be interesting to see more scenes with Lionel and Julia, maybe in private. Santana asks Cruz about Augusta, and he says he believes her story. So then Cruz and Eden try and figure out where they're going to have the wedding. They didn't come up with the yacht yet, though.
No, but I'm sure that's going to come soon enough.
Sophia arrives and congratulates them, which really makes Eden happy, and they have a nice hug.
Yeah, that was nice.
But Sophia says, "Oh, by the way, Carmen was here too, and she was not happy."
I think Carmen's a known quantity, certainly to Cruz and to Eden as well.
I wonder if Carmen will be at the wedding. Then Cruz asks Sophia about the night Channing was murdered. She says she was in the hallway dressed as Dominic, and that she was planning to reveal herself to her children and was going to surprise Channing first.
And I found that really interesting that she had already decided that Channing was going to be the first one to find out. And it really makes me wonder if she did in fact reveal herself to Channing, and if something happened, during that reveal. We've already seen that Channing is not, or was not, perhaps the most pleasant character. So maybe he didn't take that the way she might have hoped.
Yeah, I mean, with her amnesia issues, she may be blocking out some portion of that night. Because she says she was in the hallway dressed as Dominic, then she heard the gunshot, and as she turned, she saw Joe Perkins coming from the other direction. That's why she knew he didn't do it. And then they went in, and Joe moved the gun, as we'd seen him doing it previously in flashbacks. And then she glimpsed a face in the mirror and had always thought it was Lionel, but now she's not so sure. And the next thing she remembers is waking up in a sanitarium in Anchorage.
So that helps us place the whole aspect of Anchorage and how that fits into her story. And
she says that she actually escaped using her disguises. and that Marcello eventually found her. Now, this is actually kind of interesting, because if she escaped, like, A, where did she go?
Yeah.
Did she escape with no money or anything? And B, how long was she waiting for Marcello to randomly find her in some place where she escaped from the place? So, I mean, maybe it's a small town and there's just one hotel nearby and Marcello just knocked on all the doors, or hung out in the restaurant in the evening to see if Sophia came down for dinner. I don't know. That's
I don't
kind of
know.
A weird...
Yeah, the story's definitely got a lot of gaps in it.
So they decide to break off this questioning, but Cruz asks her to come back later. And he wonders, well, who brought Sophia to Anchorage in the first place? So he radios some of his contacts and says, I want you to pull any visa applications for Marcello Armonti going back 15 years. And they come back that he had applied 3 times for a U.S. visa. One 16 years ago, which was, of course, when he found Sophia. 2, 3 years ago, which I don't think we know about anything about that, do we?
No.
And then 4 months ago, so that would have been January when we first saw him. And then Cruz thinks, wait a minute, check for Hans Riker. And the answer comes back only once, July 15th, 1979. Cruz said, that's 2 weeks before Channing was killed. I think we're on the right track.
I think he is too. Yeah.
So that leaves us with a problem. Who hit Joe Perkins on September 6th, 1984, in episode 29?
Yep,
when he was meeting with Dominic.
That is a mystery that I suspect may never be solved, because Marcello seemed like the obvious candidate, and that doesn't fit with his timeline.
Unless, when he arrived 3 years ago, he actually stayed in the U.S. the entire 3 years, and then only left at the in September 84, only to come back in January. That's literally the thing. Unless he somehow sneaked in under another alias. So that's something. That's something the writers need to answer for. Who hit Joe Perkins?
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode. So, but I think we're on the right track, as Cruz said.
I think so.
We may be barreling ahead to finding out who killed Channing.
Sounds good.
And we will see you after we watch episode 200 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye.
Happy 200th episode! Welcome back.
Hello.
This is our 200th episode, because we've just watched episode 200 of Santa Barbara. Well, we watched it yesterday. Original air date Wednesday, May 8th, 1985. Rosa is not in this episode. But Warren says, thanks, Rosa, as he walks into the door. So that's the first Capwell servant who's not actually in this episode. Maggie and Warren see Mason in the middle of his negotiations with Ross, and Ross has just offered $1 million, which comes with a gag order and no confession of liability, or what's the phrase? No admittance of liability by Capwell Enterprises or CC. Well, that annoys Maggie, so she declines. So Mason and Warren and Maggie are going to go all the way against Capwell.
And in fairness, you know, when they were kind of talking about it, that little huddle, her and Mason and Warren. And both Mason and Warren said, you know, it's a lot of money. But, you know, she wasn't going to get any kind of sense of justice out of it if she couldn't tell Ben's story publicly. So they really, you know, it really was her call. And they actually didn't say, oh, you should take this. Neither of them really said that.
Mason said the best she could hope that the judge would say that Capwell did something wrong, but that CC never would.
But it does occur to me, if there is a trial, like, at the very least, with Warren on her side, she's going to get Ben's story out there. Even if, she doesn't win the trial, she at least gets Ben's story out there. And if that means a lot to her, then, that in itself might be worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did say that $1 million would be enough to cover all the medical bills and to take care of Ben for the rest of his life if properly invested.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it's a sufficient amount. Up in Monterey, Ted is writing like in a postcard. I'm sure she'll be happy to get that.
Yeah, maybe not so much when she knows the context it was written in.
Mm-hmm. He goes into Jackie's hotel room through the adjoining door because she's listening to some horrible music. And then a not much better song comes on. Is that the James Taylor one? I've Seen Fire and I've Seen Rain. I think is the second one. I couldn't identify the first one. It was so terrible. Jackie thanks him for his support. She's been writing a letter to Larry. She said, someday I may finish this. But she's ready to go home. So she says, it's getting late, let's go. They get home, and Brick tells them the Navy called while she was out, and they wanted to talk to her about Larry's funeral. She says she'll call them back tomorrow. And then Jackie assumes Ted's tired and wants to go home. He says, not too tired to be back here in 5 minutes if you need me. Jackie says, there are times today that I was feeling jealous of Lakin.
Yeah, that's probably not going to play out that well, I would think.
She kisses him on the cheek and he leaves. So, nothing happened in Monterey at least.
No, I wasn't even sure if they actually ended up staying a night there.
It sounds like they spent a day in the hotel.
Yeah.
Jack Stanfield Lee tells Renfro that he wants Amy's baby by Friday. Renfro goes, but it's Wednesday. Which it is. It's a Wednesday episode, so that syncs up. So he says, tell her that you need to induce labor. So Renfro encounters Brick when he goes to the Perkins house, and he says, I want to make sure Amy's okay. He says, every time you see her, you tell her something that's more frightening to her than the last time. So you're the one who's making her not okay. And so Brick says, we're going out of town, so she might just be born somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So this really freaks out Renfro, and he ends up arguing with Brick, and Brick says, well, I think I'd like a second opinion. He goes, oh, that's good. Then you won't be leaving town till you've gotten that.
Mm-hmm. I actually really liked the way Brick handles these sorts of situations, and he just says, well, there's other hospitals. There's other doctors,
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to let himself get rattled by Renfro.
But maybe he's thinking in the back of his head that something dodgy is going on, and he's just trying to taunt Renfro.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is, if Jeff was now, completely known to be infertile, which apparently, the autopsy report revealed, then there's definitely something dodgy going on with Amy's baby. And for this doctor, Renfro, to just sort of pop up and suddenly take over her primary care and be trying to lead that care into all sorts of sort of dodgy directions.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it is very suspicious. I don't know how he would necessarily connect that with Jack, although Amy's sudden employment with Jack is weird too.
Mm-hmm.
And as a viewer, it's hard for me to connect all of those things, because it does seem really strange, this plot.
He does end up Brick ends up going to visit Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
He talks a bit about Amy, so I don't know, maybe Cruz will remember something that Brick said when something else crosses his desk at some point or something.
Yeah, or be able to access some information down the line that Brick can't access himself.
So, Cruz and Eden invite Brick and Amy to the opening of the Orient Express the day after tomorrow, where they'll announce their engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Friday, the day that they want Renfro to induce labor. Brick's going out of town Wednesday. They might not be in town Friday.
It'll be a big episode.
Yeah. Cruz is making a list of fake doctors and nurses. And then he asks Eden how long Philip has worked for the Capwells, and she says 13 years. Even though we know that the actor has left the show. Sophia visits Cruz again, and he asks if Marcello knew that she was going to be in Santa Barbara 6 years ago. And she says yes, and he wonders if Marcello could be the one that brought her to the sanitarium. She says, well, a month ago I would have said no, but I've learned all these new things.
Yeah.
It's possible. And she says the Count had just died. So that's we were wondering about the Count.
Yeah.
So he had just died, and she was Marcello's only family. So this is interesting. The earlier conversations with Marcello and Sophia, when he says, oh, come back home to the family, really he was just talking about him and her.
Yeah, maybe a crumbling old estate somewhere in Italy or wherever. But although, if he's, if the Count was like Italian royalty, a lot of royalty from these long-lost sort of royal families don't even live in their country of origin anymore. A lot of them are, in New York or Los Angeles or whatever. So that might, at one point he was saying, oh, we'll go back to New York. So that might just as easily be where they were based as well.
And she says perhaps he was worried about losing a second family and to the same man.
Yeah.
So that's a good thought. And then Sophia tells Cruz that Kelly and Marcello are on the yacht, so Cruz and Eden go there. And they mention that they're getting married on the 20th. And Marcello says, of what month? And they say May. He goes, oh, I was planning to organize a yachting party for the family on the 20th.
So we did think that yacht was going to play a role in his plans.
So it's interesting that he's now in the position where he can organize a yachting party with someone else's yacht.
Yeah.
But I guess he's a member of the family now, so he's like a brother to them. Brandon asks Gina why she's taking those pills all the time. She says, well, I get headaches. So now, at least one person knows she takes a lot of pills. I'm sure Eden will get this out of Brandon at some point.
Yeah. I think so.
Cece asks her what Mason wanted from her earlier. Mason had, in between his discussions with Maggie and Warren and the lawyer, told Gina, meet me in 10 minutes at the State Street Bistro. Your marriage depends on it. So Gina says, oh, I don't even listen anymore. And then she says she wants him to win the lawsuit. I want you to teach Mason a lesson and crush him like a bug. Which Cece finds odd, this sudden hatred for Mason on Gina's part. But I mean, there was that fake molestation charge she made against him.
Yeah, she has, and sort of thrown Mason under the bus a few times. And I think it's just the way she said it as well. That
as
really,
if he had just done something to her.
Yeah. And I think, in a way, CC kind of almost reserves the right to really hate Mason more than anyone else. So
maybe he thinks there is something going on with that conversation.
Yeah.
And that Gina hasn't told him the whole story.
Yeah.
Warren manages to talk Maggie into a non-date date. He says he's got a pass to the opening of the Orient Express restaurant at the top of the Capitol Hotel. And she says she's already going to be there in plain clothes.
Yeah.
And then they have a joke about how fancy her plain clothes are going to be for that assignment. Gina arrives at the State Street Bistro, and Mason tells her she's very attractive and soon will be begging to sleep with him. Of course, she doesn't believe him, but he reveals that he knows she's not pregnant, and then says that he and Cece share a rare type A negative blood type. And so he's really the only one who can get her pregnant with a Capwell baby that won't arouse Cece's suspicions. Marcello's on the yacht, and he puts a bomb in the briefcase and says it needs to be closer to the engine room. So that little room where he was looking for a place to put a bomb, while there may have been some good alcoves in there, it's not close enough to the engine room. So I guess he needs to disable the yacht and maybe sink it. So I'm not sure. Unless he just wants to strand them out there.
Yeah, and it's not clear what he's planning for himself in this either. Is this like a kamikaze mission? Is he going to go down with the ship too, or is he going to bail and leave them all to die?
Or is he going to use the explosion and the sinking as an excuse to kill Cece so that it looks like an accident or something?
That's a possibility too.
Kelly comes barging in and bangs the door against the briefcase, which freaks out Marcello briefly. And then later when she goes to pick it up, when they're leaving, he screams, "Don't touch that!" And he says, just think a man should carry his own briefcase.
Yeah, he kind of blames his sudden outburst on being European, which he finds it.
So it seems like they had a day of swimming and hanging out on the deck of the yacht.
Yeah.
So, and Marcello tells her that he doesn't think Joe would want her to be alone forever. Back at home, Marcello hides the briefcase as Cruz arrives. And he asks Marcello about all his visas. And he's got his most recent passport with him, which only goes back 4 years. And then after, some brief discussion about that, he says, well, the trip I'm really interested in wouldn't be in here because it was done under the name Hans Riker. Which I think Marcello takes in stride. I think he assumes, now that Cruz knows his name's Hans Riker, that he might have looked that up. But he says, what were you doing 6 years ago? And she goes, well, I usually fly through New York, but I was at a conference in Montreal. He says, so you're not the one who took Sophia out to Anchorage? No, of course not. He says, oh, well, here's a list of doctors and nurses that remember seeing you in Anchorage. And this is the fake list that Cruz had come up with, but Marcello buys it and says, yes, that was me. And they said, well, where were you when Channing was killed? Says, I was in Los Angeles. I read about it in the papers. Says, well, that can't be possible, says Cruz, because the papers didn't have the story until the day that you say you were in Anchorage. So then he says, and in any case, there's one very well-trained member of the Capwell household who remembers seeing you and who greeted you when you first came back in January and recognized you. And that is Philip the butler, and they have him in the hallway ready to identify you. And Marcello says, don't bother, I was there. And then Cruz opens the door to reveal the empty hallway. This is now the second Capwell servant that wasn't really in this episode that people had fake conversations with.
It occurred to me during this whole bluff that really none of this investigative line of inquiry or the bluff itself would have been at all possible if it weren't for the fact that Marcello is a foreign national. If he wasn't coming in and out on a visa or whatever, if he was just, some guy who was born and raised in New York or something, they wouldn't have that whole trail of evidence, would they?
And it's interesting, we didn't really get any of the real info from Anchorage. Cruz had someone go and dig it up, but then Cruz ended up using fake info. So that's kind of weird. Maybe there is still some further confirmation to come, or maybe no one remembered anything.
Yeah, when he talked to the guy investigating up there, it didn't sound like he'd been able to uncover very much. So.
I mean, he did. Is that where they found out Sophia escaped? No, Sophia told him that she escaped using her disguises, which is interesting because when Joe went to visit, they pretended not to know her. Maybe they were just covering up for the escape.
High turnover. No one remembered.
And we had a proper episode with the credits this time.
And they're very long credits indeed.
And we are comparing some of the differences between last time. Now, last time we had credits. These are the episodes that are available online right now that are foreign versions, most of them. So the credits would not have been on the same episodes as what we had in North America. But last time, we had a number of people in the credits that had already gone, like Peter and Joe. Last time was on episode 169. Now, people that are not in today's credits that were there, in addition to Joe and Peter, are Elizabeth, who we talked about, and Marissa was not in the credits today. And I thought that odd, because I know she's in future episodes.
Yeah.
So I looked it up. And the next time we see her is almost 200 episodes from now. So it looks like they just either let her go or put her on a recurring contract or whatever the other contract is, where they just use you when they need you. So in a way, she's not she's no longer a regular character since episode 192, eight episodes ago.
I wonder if that would be a situation perhaps where the actress, wanted to go and do a play or something like that. And
I was trying to find some interviews online to see, but I couldn't find any further information about it. So so she's either technically off the show, and they bring her back in the future on that, one day at a time contract that Summer had. So yeah, she may well be gone.
Because when we talked to Nicholas Coster, Nicholas Coster, he was talking about his time on, was it Another World, where he wanted to go and do a play. Was that the...
It was either Another World or Somerset.
Yeah. And he actually left the show for a little bit to go and do this play and then came back.
Mm-hmm. So we have some new people in the credits. Brandon DeMott is in the credits. Played by Scott Curtis. He's been playing Brandon for a while, but I guess now he's in the main credits. Jay Stanfield Lee, played by Joel Crothers. Julia, no last name yet, played by Nancy Grom. And Nick Hartley is in the credits. David Haskell, our photographer.
So he'll probably be around for a while.
Does seem he'll be around for a long time. And, of course, the new Santana is in the credits. So, it's too bad we don't have a complete set of the North American versions. I guess IMDb's information must come from there originally, but I don't know who put that in, because if you look at some other shows of the same era, there's no data that's that complete about Santa Barbara. So I think a fan must have this data somewhere that they uploaded to IMDb. So that's our 200th episode.
Yeah.
And our next milestone will be, I guess, when we get to the 10% mark.
And
then after that will be the 1 year anniversary. So
yeah, that's coming up.
We're down a Perkins.
Well, more than one Perkins, if we think of from the beginning of the
John
series.
and Joe.
And now
we just got Amy and Jade on the show now. And Brick living there. So. I guess we'll see how long Jade and Amy managed to stay on the show, and little baby. I think we bet it was going to be John.
That's what we were thinking.
Pretty likely.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out soon if Amy has her baby today or tomorrow or Friday. Who makes it to the opening of the Orient Express?
Yeah.
And will Marcello reschedule his yachting party? His plan has to happen on the 20th because that's the anniversary. So whatever he does will still happen on that day.
And it looks like we do have a big court battle brewing between CC and Mason and Maggie et al. CC is pulling out all the stops, and it sounds like he's going to bribe a bunch of people and get a bunch of potential witnesses out of the way, and is willing to spend $1.5 million on this. So
I think there may still be a chance that he pulls Jack Stanfield Lee into this battle.
Yeah, and that'll be kind of interesting because the Jack Stanfield Lee that we have seen does not seem like he would be actually that great in a courtroom. So.
Yeah. He would try and talk his way out of it, more likely then. But we'll see.
We'll see.
This is only a Wednesday episode, so we'll be back in a few minutes with the Thursday episode 201. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
You are watching Misha and Dianne watch Santa Barbara, the world's longest-running Santa Barbara documentary series. Lionel convinces Brick to let him into the Lockridge mansion. Brick's just on his way out to go out of town with Amy, so it doesn't take too much convincing. Lionel witnesses Augusta on her knees searching for some makeup that she knocked off the table. And then he has an argument with Julia over whether they should be doing everything for Augusta, or, as Julia thinks they should do, wait until Augusta asks for help. Then Julia brings Augusta a fur jacket that Lionel has given her, And she gets it described to her by Julia, and Augusta says, "I'll bet this came from Jack Stanfield Lee." So then Lionel sneaks out again.
Now, I'm kind of wondering why she would assume that, since the last time we saw Augusta with Jack Stanfield Lee, he couldn't even quite remember what his pet name for her was. So
Maybe she was just trying to impress Julia with her Jack Stanfield Lee connection.
Maybe.
Then Lionel tells Julia he's going to secretly move back in. And Julia, after Lionel does move in, still refuses to go back to Phoenix. She tells Lionel she's still the primary caregiver for Augusta. That's not going to change no matter how Lionel sneaks around the house.
It'll be entertaining, though, to see Lionel, as you say, sneaking around the house and Augusta there, probably not knowing, or maybe she will, who knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did kind of stop while she was trying to pick up her makeup and wondered if someone was in the room. And Lionel was, so maybe she thinks Lionel is sneaking around.
And I don't know if he would be hiding from Minx too, or
Yeah, that's the thing. We haven't seen her in a while, but
We
he's got to
haven't.
clear it. He said he would clear it with the maid and Warren and Lakin, but I don't think he mentioned Minx in that. And we saw Breeze again. Haven't seen Breeze in a while.
no, and I think Breeze was even mentioned in this episode, wasn't he?
Well, Breeze was on the bed, so Augusta's got a seeing eye pet potentially. Sophia has a dream where she's sitting at a makeup table and the whole environment is black, like in a dream. And then she sees Lionel's face in what I thought was a window, but maybe it was meant to be the mirror. And then Lionel's face turns into Marcello's face. And then she wakes up from her nightmare and thinks it couldn't be Marcello.
And this makes me think, now that we know that Marcello was actually at the Capwell house on the day Channing was murdered, and we know that, of course, Sophia was there, maybe she had come to believe that she saw Lionel when she really saw Marcello. Maybe Marcello hypnotized her to think she had actually seen Lionel.
This is seeming quite likely. Sophia goes to meet with Cruz and Eden at the State Street Bistro and tells them that she's suddenly afraid of Marcello. And she says she's shocked that Marcello was at Channing's party and wonders how she could ever have blamed Lionel. Cruz asks her about the note that she planted on Lionel when she was masquerading as Dominic. And she said that just as Joe was picking up the gun, she spotted the note and picked that up and put it in her pocket and didn't find it for months later. Mason comes over to say that while they were talking, Marcello briefly came in and spotted them together and left again. Then Sophia tells Eden that Cruz will make a wonderful husband. This is while Cruz has gone off to have a brief conversation with Mason, which we'll detail later. Eden says she hopes married life won't become dreary and humdrum. And then she apologizes to Sophia for how she acted when she first came to town. So that's nice. So I think the Sophia-Eden relationship is pretty much healed very quickly.
Yes, and we're sort of seeing the axis shift where everyone was with Cece, of course, before Sophia came on the scene. And then when she arrived, they were split. And now I would say we're at a situation where the kids all get along with Sophia and none of them are really getting along with dear old Dad.
Then when Sophia goes home, which I think she still lives at the Capwell Hotel, I've decided, because she gets in an elevator and she closes it, and just before it closes, Marcello manages to get in.
Yeah.
And she's a little bit taken aback by that, and he insists they have drinks together at 7 later on. So she says yes, but she really has no intention to. Instead, she goes to the houseboat and tells Cruz and Eden she doesn't really want to be alone with Marcello.
No.
So Cruz and Eden say that she can stay there. I forget what she wanted to do. make some phone calls or something. So Cruz needn't leave, and Marcello pops up at the houseboat.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "How did you know I was here?" "Oh, I followed you. We're supposed to be having drinks right now." And he says, "There's something I want to tell you. I was at Channing's party, and I'm the one who took you to Anchorage." He says, "Of course you already know this because Cruz Castillo told you." So, not very, disarming the way he attacked her with that information. Doesn't really help allay her fears.
No. Marcella's being very creepy this episode.
So she says, she feels he's been manipulating her life. And he says, "Oh, you kept secrets from me. You didn't tell me why you were coming to America 6 years ago." And he says, "You shouldn't be listening to Cruz Castillo."
Mm-hmm.
And then he asks her if Cruz thinks that he killed Channing.
Mm-hmm.
And Sophia, stumbles over her answer and says, I don't know what the police are doing. How would I know? Marcello says, "I think you and he have been setting traps for me." Does Cece know that he suspects me of killing Channing? And Sophia says, "I don't think so."
Mm-hmm.
And then Sophia says, "I think you're still out for revenge against Cece, aren't you? And you're using me and Kelly." Marcello says, "You are the only real family I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've turned against me too."
So I think Marcello is starting to sound increasingly unhinged, and we've certainly seen him have his moments in private, but he's starting to sound a little more unhinged with other people now, too.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that maybe he would spare Sophia and Kelly from whatever revenge he had against CC.
Yeah.
But maybe now he's thinking Sophia's not on his side anymore. Who knows what he'll decide. Brick places a phone call from a payphone and says, "Yep, we're on our way, and we don't want anyone to know where we're going. That's why we're coming to you."
Mm-hmm.
So first thing I'm wondering is he going to visit his mom?
Who is you? Yeah, that'll be a really interesting thing to find out.
Because the only relatives we know about are his parents, and he hasn't seen his dad since he was 6, so
Yeah.
his mom's a likely thing, unless it's another friend like that guy who gave them the hot tip on the horse. Then we see Jack Stanfield Lee shouting into the phone at Renfro to find Amy Perkins. And he says you don't want to be on the wrong side of the wrath of the person who's our employer. So I assume that's Peter Simonson or Walter Simonson or whatever his name is. Parker Simonson.
Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of interesting, actually, that Jack Stanfield Lee is so wrapped up in the situation with Amy's baby. He's keeping tabs on it, by the hour. He's tracking her, basically.
That's his main project that he's currently involved with.
Yeah.
So, back to what Cruz said to Mason earlier at the State Street Bistro.
Mm-hmm.
To everyone's surprise, he says, "We haven't forgotten about you, Mason. We've been looking for your mother this whole time, and we have no idea if she even left Santa Barbara. We tracked, based on the information you gave us, we confirmed she did arrive in Santa Barbara 2 months ago. But, we have no idea where she is or if she's left." So I thought they'd dropped that plot, and it seems like they've inched it not forward at all. They've put a placeholder saying nothing's changed.
And it's interesting because this is sort of the fourth thing by my count that Cruz is currently involved with. Searching for for Mason's mom, searching for Channing Jr.'s killer, looking into this whole thing with Jeff being murdered, and of course, maybe not quite as enthusiastically, but the whole thing that Nick raised about Kelly potentially being in danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we haven't seen Nick or Kelly for a couple days, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we didn't see Ted and Jackie today. So
No.
How they're doing. And then, of course, Mason. Mason's yet another rapey love interest.
Yeah.
storyline. He tells Gina that in exchange for his sperm that she needs to pick him up at 7 o'clock and bring him to a motel in a limo, as he's always dreamed of, and make sure there's satin sheets and bring some good caviar. And this whole time he's telling her all these things he wants from her later, he's dictating letters to her that he needs typed up, and he doesn't have a secretary. So she takes all these notes about the Warren Lockridge case, it turns out.
Yeah, I think that could boomerang back on Mason.
And he ends up bringing them to him later. So at 7 p.m., she sends a limo to pick him up and bring him to the Capwell Hotel. He says, it's not the presidential suite that I'm used to, but this'll do. And he approves of the champagne and caviar that she's ordered, and he gives her something to put on, and she changes into it. And he's telling her the whole time how he wants her to treat him, and she starts unbuttoning his shirt, and he says, one other thing I did want from you, sort of financially. She says, you want money? Not really. I just want you to sign a document that will put me completely in control of Brandon's trust fund. So that's actually another one of Mason's surprise things that he comes up with that actually sounds quite logical once you hear it, but that you wouldn't dream would have happened.
No.
So it's interesting that I guess Gina must be currently in charge of it, which makes sense because she just got married to Cece. It wouldn't have made sense for Cece to have control of it before, and maybe Cece's planning on having her sign something to sign it over to him eventually. But Mason obviously wants to head that off and get the control while she has the right to sign it over. And he says, of course, this will be a secret. We don't want CC knowing. So that's probably a storyline for a little further down. I think the getting pregnant bit is the primary one right now.
I just feel like between the two of them, Gina and Mason are building such a complicated house of cards that, any unexpected event could kind of blow over all of their plans and reset things.
It's interesting that Gina's basically decided to go along with Mason's idea to get pregnant with an A-negative baby.
Now, I suspect that her, little pill addiction is maybe also playing a role in this, in perhaps clouding her judgment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or, at
or
least...
she kind of likes Mason and she's decided...
Yeah, well, they were almost a little bit flirty when we first saw them together, as it were, in France. And there was even just a little bit of a hint of that the last episode. So, maybe...
It's possible Gina's thinking, I'm totally blameless in all this anyway, so...
And, they're both evenly matched. As I say right now, I think Gina's a little compromised because of her addiction. But, I think they are both always looking for opportunities. And for Gina, Mason seems to have the upper hand right now. But, she might find out some stuff. For example, taking secretarial duties for him that she could then use against him. I think both of them are always having their eye out for an opportunity to get a leg up on each other.
Gina did say that one of her main worries was that Mason would try to use it against her, that they slept together. And he says, well, if I tried to tell Dad that, he would murder me with his bare hands. So that's your kind of guarantee that I'm not going to tell him.
Yeah.
So that is it for the plots, and we had the credits again. And I noticed something else in the credits. Remember how I said that Marissa had gone missing since 169? Well, I just noticed, looking at the list again, that actually Danny is not in the credits.
Ah, so that might have...
He wasn't in the credits way back in episode 169 when Marissa still was. So he's actually been, put on, I guess, recurring role status and taken out of the main cast list for at least, a couple of months.
So he might have just been brought back on I don't know how they do it, on a short-term contract or something.
I
Just
think
for
they
that
just
one or
pay
two
him
episodes.
for a day
Yeah.
whenever he's on.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. Jade is still in the full cast, so it's not like they backburnered both of them. Although we see her as rarely as we see Danny.
Yeah.
Maybe they figured at the time, well, with us getting rid of Marissa, we'll need Jade more, but clearly I think Jade and Danny have appeared about the same amount of time, even though sometimes not in the same episode. So it's really a shame, because I think there were some things there they could have done, and the whole Perkins family was kind of an important building block of the structure of the show at the beginning.
Yeah, I think with Jade and Danny, we had a lot of potential there. I think Marissa could have been used a lot more as well.
Especially with her link to the school.
Yeah,
which we saw early on was being used to link different things together.
Yeah, it does seem like a missed opportunity, especially when they're introducing all sorts of characters who, to me, I would have much rather seen a bit more about the Perkins family than the whole Jackie storyline, for example. Why couldn't it might have been in some ways more interesting if Ted had had some kind of indiscretion with Jade, or even with Marissa. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, she's single.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Lyman's going to be wrapped up pretty soon, as they're all going to graduate next month. And we don't even know what Jade's post-graduation plans are.
No.
Unlike Ted, who we know probably wants to go to Stanford, we have no idea what Jade's going to do over the summer. And I think we briefly talked about Lakin's plans, but I don't think it's been months since we heard about that. So,
yeah.
And it's interesting, Lionel and Augusta haven't been all excited about her impending graduation and what she's going to be doing next year either.
No, they're very caught up in their own drama, which might be part of the reason, too, why Lakin's starting to feel a little bit, I don't know, a little bit jaded about them, because they're so wrapped up in their own drama and their own dynamic that, they're not really, I don't think, as present in other things in their life.
Maybe after the May sweeps, as we go into June, there'll be time for the kids to talk about their plans, their summer plans, and their plans for next year.
Well, I'm sure, whatever ends up happening with Ted and Jackie, that there will be some repercussions from that as well. And summer would be the time to work those things out, because they're not really in school. So if, for example, Ted's plans to go to university get deep sixed from this relationship, then this will be the time for that to play out.
And the four of them still have potential of getting summer jobs this year, like the wacky ones they had in LA last year. So I assume we'll see the four of them do something like that.
Yeah, I'm really hoping we, even though he's not in the credits right now, that we do see more of Danny, and I would like to see more of Jade as well before we get too far into other plot lines.
Well, maybe come June we'll see them more. That is it for episode 201. We'll be back after we watched episode 202 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished watching episode 202 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Friday, May the 10th, 1985. And the sweeps are here.
Oh, yeah.
We are in the middle of a fun May in Santa Barbara. The Orient Express is opening tonight at 7:30. Cruz tells Maggie to keep an eye on Marcello at the party, but also his friend Nick says someone's trying to kill Kelly, so watch out for that too. So Maggie's like, okay, trying to watch Marcello and a potential killer of Kelly at this time. Warren manages to snag a dance with Maggie after she changes into her gown, but before she goes officially on duty.
She's wearing a very glittery, sort of lilac colored gown with a matching jacket, silver piping. This whole party is very 80s.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
A lot of sequins.
Warren bribes a member of the band. Santana wants to know why Marcello and Lindsay are on Cruz's list, and he won't tell her.
Now, I was trying to think, and I think I asked you before we started, where exactly Santana got the list, but you were reminding me that she would know who was asked to show up.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Everyone that Cruz asked to show up at the study that day would have been on his suspect list. So.
Yeah.
Then she starts to complain that the police have taken 6 years and they still haven't arrested anyone.
She has a point.
Yeah, Cruz should have said, "Oh, I've only been on the case 2 weeks."
That's right.
So Santana tracks down Mason at the State Street Bistro and asks him everything he knows about Marcello and Lindsay Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that Marcello is Sophia's stepson, and he's hated Dad since World War II, and he was there on the night Channing was killed. And all he'll say about Lindsay is that he was a friend of Channing's from after Channing and Sophia broke up. Sorry. He was a friend of Channing's from after Channing and Santana broke up. So he almost makes it sound like they were together after you and Channing broke up. If you weren't expecting him to say something like that, it might have passed over your head. But
Yeah.
I think Santana thought he had phrased it oddly.
It could have been taken as he was some friend who Channing made after. Like it could be platonic.
Mm-hmm. Kelly and Eden get ready for the party. For some reason, down in the atrium.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting on their makeup, and they've got their clothes all ready. And they say the last time they got ready together was before the prom, when Kelly and Joe ended up spending the night in the loft above the Perkins garage, while Eden was supposed to be chaperoning. And Nick shows up to see if Kelly needs a date. He's been hired by Eden to photograph the party. Mm-hmm. So this is handy. Got another ex-CIA guy, or whatever they're calling it. Marcello asks Sophia if she still has doubts about him, that he may have killed Channing. She says, "Why wouldn't I believe you?" But she doesn't seem entirely convinced to me.
Now, they're really, when you think about it, there's no way to make yourself more suspicious looking than to be continually asking someone if they think you've committed a murder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe he's trying to decide whether he wants to blow her up along with everyone else or not. Mm-hmm. The 8th floor of the Capwell Hotel is what the elevator lobby says. Even though we know the presidential suite is on the 5th floor, and the elevator's never been seen to go higher than 5, suddenly we have an 8th floor, which is the roof.
Very oddly sort of constructed hotel. Now, I'm almost wondering if maybe there's offices between like the 5th and 8th floor or something.
Maybe that were only accessible by the stairs once you got to the 5th. Or that service elevator that Augusta used that one time. Maybe that actually goes to all the floors. But I imagine that with a restaurant opening up there, they would probably make modifications to the elevators to let them go all the way up. But maybe they jump from 5 to 8 and still don't stop at the business floors or something. We did see a lot of elevator action today. Oh, yeah. But I can't say I recall whether we saw the numbers at the top of the elevator suddenly going all the way to 8 rather than 5. I actually forgot to check that out. And from people inside the elevator, we didn't see the numbers part of it. But yeah, definitely we've got a much higher hotel than we previously thought, and maybe that the exterior shots we see sometimes don't seem to indicate an 8-story hotel, but really 7 stories because the roof is not really a floor. The courier sneaks into the party disguised as one of the band. Ted asks Sophia to be his date.
I was very relieved that it was Sophia that he asked.
And not Jackie.
And not Jackie. Because, at one point, he was in the atrium with Eden and Kelly, and he said, "Oh, I don't have a date. Oh, I have an idea." And I thought, "Oh, dear God, no," because that would be such a disaster.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, Lakin's going with someone else, and Jade's going with someone, or whatever. Jade has a boyfriend or something."
Yeah.
I don't know. We've learned something about Jade. So Jade and Lakin arrive at the party with two guys from school, at least I assume. There's that tall blonde guy we've seen before. I forget what his name is, Mark or something. And
Jade looks like she's in a rock video in this one.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Yeah.
wearing a lot of satin and sequins. I think she has a headband on, too. I think she has a sequined headband on.
Lakin's date objects when Ted tries to talk to Lakin.
Now, I thought this was a bit much because why is this guy even there, actually?
Mm-hmm.
I guess Jade is now she's friends with Kelly, right? Because Perkins.
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably there through Jade.
I guess so.
Because Lakin would have been there if she had been with Ted, but
Mm-hmm.
she and Ted are not together. So I'm assuming they're all kind of guests of Jade's, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a good question. How did they get invited?
Yeah, at any rate, for this loser to be picking a fight with Ted, who is far more legitimately there than they are.
He says to Ted, "She's with me now," which Lakin didn't seem to care for at the time. And they end up fighting, Ted and blonde guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cece tries to break that up and get Ted to apologize, but Ted refuses. Then Lakin gets upset with her date and decides to leave the party, and he's drunk, so he's not going to drive her home.
Mm-hmm.
Ted runs into her at the elevator and offers her a ride home, which she accepts.
Yeah. It's very frosty between them, I think. Although a lot wasn't really made of it at the time, I think Ted running into Lakin and Jade in the hospital and then running off with Jackie, I think really did have a very chilling effect on whatever truce was starting to emerge between Lakin and Ted.
One way I'm thinking this could go is somehow this could be a very long ride home and they could end up back together by the end of it, if the conversation goes the right way.
I think that's possible, yeah. But I'm just, because the last time Lakin and Ted had a conversation, they were starting to kind of thaw out a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Ted was in hospital.
And then he sent her that postcard from Monterey, which she may have gotten by now.
Yeah. But she's very cold to him in this, so I'm thinking that, her little meet up with him at the hospital and him running off with Jackie perhaps kind of put them at outs again.
Yeah. Gina scowls at Mason when she and Cece arrive. And then Mason tries to corner her and asks if she's signed the papers yet to give him control of Brandon's trust fund. She says she left them at home, and he says, "Oh, no worries, I have another copy. And maybe we can even complete the deal in a coat closet I saw next to the kitchen. Kind of like a vaccine. Kind of like a vaccination. It'll be over before you know it," he says. So I'm not sure what he's getting out of that deal, if it's going to be over before she knows it.
Yeah.
So that's his payment.
Doesn't sound great.
She throws a drink in his face. So that's entirely appropriate.
I think so.
But then she gets upset when she sees Cece dancing with Sophia. And Gina ends up dancing with Mason.
And I noticed at the party, Sophia's Cece's congratulating Eden and that. And Gina doesn't seem to really notice that Eden is still on completely good terms with Cece. Like, the last time we really saw Eden and Gina together. Gina was kind of excited at the idea of Eden getting into trouble. And, that obviously didn't happen. Like, Eden stood up to Cece. I don't think he loves the marriage to Cruz. I wouldn't put it past him to try and sabotage it in some way. But but Eden has not ended up the outcast that Mason has, and that Gina was, I think, kind of hoping she would be. So there wasn't really anything said about that, and Gina didn't seem to be noticing it, but I'm wondering if she's really taken it in with all the pills she's been taking and with all the issues she has with Mason right now.
I don't know if she would have tried to talk Cece out of going to the opening, because I guess it is in his hotel. And it is a special event, so maybe he's kind of expected to be there.
Yeah.
So during their dance, Cece tells Sophia that he's been very hard on her these past few months. It was wrong of me. I realized what a difficult husband I must have been. This is a shocking thing to come out of Cece Capwell's mouth. Has he ever apologized to anyone before since the show started? So this is a pretty amazing turn of events, and exactly the sort of thing Gina was fearing, I would think. So he asks Sophia if it's possible they could be friends someday, and she says, someday.
Yeah.
So now Sophia's made up with Lionel and on the verge of making up with Cece. So and made up with Eden. So I think she's almost got her family back.
Yeah.
So Mason cashes in on a dance that Santana owes him for the info he gave her earlier. And she asks if they could dance next to Marcello and Kelly. And then Marcello and Mason swap partners when Mason asks Kelly to dance. And so Santana takes the opportunity to say to Channing, after some small talk about Italy, to say to Marcello, after some small talk about Italy, I hear you're on the suspect list. Which Marcello doesn't take well. He goes, I couldn't care less about that, but then he dumps her and leaves.
Yeah, I thought that was a rather artless way to start that conversation.
Yeah, she got blocked very quickly.
And, when you think about it, I think anyone who kind of came at a conversation like that would probably not get a good response, even if the person was completely innocent. It's, it's kind of aggressive.
Yeah. And then she dances with Cruz. He says, I thought I told you to steer clear of him. He's not your type, which is an interesting way to put it. And Santana says, he doesn't look very much like a murderer. So that's her take from her brief dance with Marcello, even though he got angry with her.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if that's to throw us off a little bit. Of course, we know that he's been busy putting together a bomb, so I think we have a good sense that assessment is maybe not accurate.
I think he's taking a day off from his bomb making to just enjoy the party. Marcello realizes that Kelly's not having much fun. She's thinking about Joe. Marcello leaves, and he gets on the first elevator, and he takes a chair with him. And shortly after, Kelly arrives, sees that elevator's taken, and gets on the second elevator. Now Maggie, who's following Marcello, sees that elevator is going down, so she goes down the stairwell. Then the courier, who's been following Kelly, sees that Kelly is going down in the elevator. She also gets in the stairwell. Inside the first elevator, we get some interesting shenanigans from Marcello. He stands on that chair, and he starts removing the light fixtures and the ceiling tiles. What do you think about that?
I think I think there's two possibilities. Either he's found a very convenient and good hiding place for something that he has, like he's starting to set up something for a future phase of his plans. Or he's perhaps doing something with the elevator to cause an accident.
I just have to say that a lot of the things in this episode, and even the last one, which I would have only heard on audio, would have been very difficult to make out what exactly was going on. I mean, all the stuff with the courier following Kelly throughout this whole episode. There was just a lot of musical things of people walking around. So it's really nice to finally see this stuff and to see these little things that I wouldn't have known about before.
Now, having said that, it is. I mean, I was glad Maggie followed him because the fact that he's tootling out to the elevator with a chair in the middle of the party it's weird, right? So I'm glad someone noticed that.
So on the second floor, some nuns get onto Kelly's elevator, and the courier is waiting for Kelly on the first floor, and she's about to go into the elevator with her gun when she realizes there's more than just Kelly in the elevator, and the nuns get out, and the courier kind of backtracks and hides back in the stairwell. Maggie has come out by this point and told Kelly that Marcello's elevator stopped for a while between floors and then went into the basement and didn't return. So Maggie goes downstairs into the basement, and Marcello hears her coming, so he hides beside a shelf with some buckets of paint or drywall plaster or something. And she doesn't really see him there. It doesn't look like a very huge basement.
No, it's pretty small.
Every time we see either of them, the elevator's kind of behind them. But somehow Maggie manages to search a corner of the room that ends up with her having her back to Marcello, and he manages to sneak into the elevator and hit the button, and before she can turn around, he's gone.
Yeah.
So she never even saw that he was down there, although she knows he was down there. I guess.
She heard the door close.
Yeah, she must know, she came down there to find him. So, once again, Marcello doing weird things. What do you think he's doing in the basement?
Well, again, I think he's either setting something up for a future plan to have, sort of everything in place or all of his supplies nearby, or he's doing some sabotage with the elevator that involves not just the elevator itself, but whatever kind of safety mechanism might be controlled from the basement, perhaps.
So I'm not sure why she decided this, but Kelly decided to go back up to the party. So she gets back in the elevator and goes up. And so the courier goes back up the stairs. And Kelly runs into Nick, who tells her that she needs to be more careful because he realized she's wandered off on her own.
Yeah.
And she says, "What makes you guys think I can't take care of myself?"
Well, she's never been able to. So
I mean, short of if she were wearing a bulletproof vest, maybe, but she's just not doing anything. She doesn't even believe there's a killer. So I'm not sure how Kelly thinks she could take care of herself if someone were trying to kill her.
It's not like we've seen her out on a gun range, learning how to handle ammunition and firearms. And it's not like we've seen her taking martial arts courses or anything like that. So
Yeah, so I strongly suspect when the time comes, someone will be rescuing her.
As usual.
And I strongly suspect that person will be Nick Hartley.
I think it might be.
I think that's where they're leading this.
Yeah, because it's interesting the kind of energy between Kelly and Nick, and that she's pushing him away. She's kind of, she's very skeptical of the whole her life being in danger thing, and she's, she kind of rolls her eyes. But there's a little bit of a chemistry there too, and she does allow herself, for example, to be persuaded to dance with him.
Yeah, exactly. So, we know Nick likes her, and other than the fact that she's annoyed that he thinks someone's trying to kill her, which she will very soon realize is true, I think they're setting this up as a new love interest for Kelly.
I think so too, especially since he's in the credits.
Since he's in the credits. Eden tells the courier, who of course is masquerading as the person in charge of the sound for the band, and who the band don't seem to think is oddly not part of them. There's a special song that Eden wanted her to cue up, and that's not being played by the band, and when she starts it up, The crowd parts and Cruz and Eden perform another dance number that they've rehearsed, much like the one that they did at Joe and Kelly's wedding. So this is very exciting to all the attendees. They're all clapping and smiling around us in a circle, and the courier takes the opportunity to walk behind the circle, closer and closer to Kelly. And Nick, who's taking photos, I think spots the movement and sees it as odd, because he seems to be tracking the courier with his camera. Maybe he does finally recognize her as the lady that was at the train park that day, because he suddenly shouts out, "Kelly, behind you, watch out!"
Now, I think this will actually be a red herring, and the courier will just be like, "What? I'm just, plugging in the sound machine or whatever." But I do think it'll be at some point during or after this party when Kelly will find her life in danger.
Not going to be a good newspaper headline for the opening of your new restaurant. Restaurant opens, assassin attempts life on owner's sister.
Or half the party gets lost in a freak elevator accident, or I don't know, lots of...
Boat blows up in harbor unexpectedly.
Yeah. There's already... There has been a fight at the party that Warren could report on.
That's right, we've got a reporter there. So, yeah, we might have to put a double issue with all the goings-on at this party.
We did see some really fun exchanges, actually. I think 2 of them between Gina and Sophia during this whole thing. First, when Cece asks Sophia to dance, and Gina gets all mad when he gets called away to break up Ted's fight, and basically gives Sophia a tongue lashing. And then I believe Cece comes back and says, I wanted to talk to you, Sophia. So she gets, And I thought that the way Sophia handles Gina is actually very reminiscent of how Eden has handled Gina, which is basically not to give her the time of day.
Yeah, because, Sophia came into this pretty much on Gina's side, and only Gina herself has really burned through that goodwill that Sophia had at the beginning of her and Cece being together.
Well, one of the things I think we're seeing throughout this is that Gina creates a lot of her own problems. No one made her become a drug addict. No one made her get into the whole thing with Hank. She was the one who's made up the lie about being pregnant, although we know it's not actually necessarily a lie.
That's true.
So yeah, she's the one who has kind of done all this to herself, and even in other ways, kind of signing everything, I guess she got from Stockman over to CC. I don't see Eden doing something like that.
I wonder if the 5 years with Stockman were as turbulent as these few months we've seen with Cece, and whether that whole 5-year relationship was just as fraught for Stockman as what Gina's doing to the Capwells now.
Well, there might have been some underlying issues that led up to that heart attack. You never know. I think there's some potential for fan fiction around that.
Maybe.
If anyone is really intent on
the
that.
original 5-year mission of Gina and Stockman.
Yeah.
Well, we saw the full credits again, but there were no changes since yesterday.
No.
So I assume these are the actual credits from that episode, but it's hard to tell. They could just be the same ones tacked on again and again. But it's got the cast that we have right now, so. And no Julia in this episode, no Jack Stanfield Lee.
No Augusta, no Lionel.
We don't know where Amy and Brick are. They're on their way somewhere, presumably.
And no Marissa, which of course is not a surprise, because we know that her appearances will be quite limited, if at all, from now on.
Marissa and Danny both will be on, I guess, recurring status. And that is it for week 41 of Santa Barbara. So we'll be back after we watch episode 203. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Gina, you let too many things alarm you.